So I know I've been talking in very abstract terms like structures of the self. Let's take this into a really concrete space. I'm going to tell you just a little story here to illustrate a disorienting dilemma. Um, be gracious with me because a lot of times when you describe a disorienting dilemma, it reveals something not so flattering about who you were when you realized this. And especially when we talk about the biases that we all have and get exposed in these instances sometimes. So right before the pandemic, I made a trip to South Africa to see my dear colleague and friend Sunday Schneider Bean. And one of the experiences that I had when I was there really sort of shook me up because I think of myself as a very open person and a very accepting person. But sometimes you have experiences that really reveal hidden expectations that you had or hidden biases that you had. And those moments are critical in intercultural learning, I think, because they again present an opportunity for learning that can be painful, right? And there can be some shame associated with acknowledging those biases. But what happened was, and keep in mind, I come from a family of pilots, so I've traveled a lot by air, and it was very shocking to me to experience this in the way that I did. So when I was in South Africa, I took a plane across country from Pretoria down to Cape Town, and when I went to the airport, I had some preconceptions about what it was going to be like. When I have often traveled in less developed countries than the United States, airport facilities have sometimes not been as nice, nice pretty terminals, air conditioning, waiting inside as opposed to outside, those kinds of things. And so I was just sort of expecting to go with the flow. It may not be what I'm used to, but I'm going to be fine. It's, I'll just deal with things as they come. But what I actually experienced was the most efficient, perfectly logical, wonderful boarding experience ever in my life. And I have gotten on a lot of airplanes all over the world. So what happened was there were these mobile signs that they moved around and they had everybody line up, very perfectly from rows, 1 through 5 and 5 through 10 and so on, all the way across the tarmac. And they did it in such a way that they could line people up and board simultaneously from both the front and the back of the plane. And the people who got on the plane first were the people in the middle of the plane. So the people in the middle of the planes, in the middle seats of the plane, entered first from the front and the back, met in the middle, sat down. The people behind them came in, sat down, sat down, sat down, so that the last people to board were at the very front and the very back of the plane. And we were all, hundreds of people on that plane, like in a minute and a half, like no problem whatsoever. And then we disembarked the same way when we got there. And I just had this moment of like, why do people all over the world not do this? Because it was such a pleasant experience. And then of course, I get to thinking about not only why I had the expectations that it would be inefficient or, some inconvenience that I was going to have to deal with, but also what values lie under the way that we actually board, for example, in the United States. And when it comes down to it, it's all about benefiting the people who have paid the most for their tickets, right? It's not about efficiency. It's not about making people comfortable. It's not about doing it quickly. It's not about not wasting people's time. It's not about anything except the people who pay the most get to get on and get comfortable and hold everybody else up, right? So that that moment of like epiphany and realization and discomfort with living with and really taking a look at what expectations, what assumptions were buried underneath what I was experiencing, and then thinking about where they came from and why I am that way and think that way and expect that way, and then trying to figure out what I'm going to do about it. How does that change how I think about and talk about and relate to other cultural groups as well as my own. That's just a quick example of a disorienting dilemma in very concrete details where you have this experience and something shifts because what you thought doesn't make sense anymore, or what you thought you knew is not really true anymore, right?